Black woman aids a millionaire with car trouble. One look at her ring changes everything. It started with a broken engine on a lonely stretch of road, but it would end with the collapse of an empire. A sapphire ring, a wooden brooch, and 20 years of silence were all that remained between two lives separated by betrayal. This is not a story of coincidence. This is a story of what was stolen and reclaimed. Before we start the story, write in the comments from which part of the world you're watching today. It was the kind of silence that shouldn't exist near a city. No cars, no wind, just the ticking of a cooling engine and the sound of shoes crunching gravel. The Maserati sat at an angle, half on the road, half in a shallow ditch. The driver, Thomas Weber, tapped at his phone in frustration. No signal. From behind him came the hum of an old truck and the unmistakable screech of aging brakes. "You need help?" The voice was calm, steady, and female. Thomas turned, instantly on guard. She wore overalls stained with oil, her hair tied back in a cloth wrap. A wrench hung from her belt. A mechanic. A woman. Black. His eyes flickered to the dented truck, and then to her hands. Calloused. Real work. "No, I'll manage," he said curtly. She smirked, walked past him, and crouched beside the Maserati. "Fuel pump relay," she murmured. "These things hate heat. Give me 5 minutes." "I said I'm fine." "You're not." "But sure." She stood and turned to leave, until the sunlight hit her hand. He saw the ring then, blue as ocean, set in thin silver, a sapphire. He blinked. Once, twice. "Where did you get that ring?" She didn't turn around. "It was a gift," she said. "It's unique." "I know." He stepped closer. "I gave one exactly like that to a girl. Long time ago. She—" "Let me guess," she interrupted. "She disappeared. You forgot her, moved on." He stiffened. "Excuse me?" Now she turned. The look in her eyes was not defiance. It was knowledge. Memory. "My name is Maya." The name meant nothing to him. Not yet. But that ring, it pulled at something half-buried. Without waiting for his reply, she returned to her truck and came back with a relay fuse. He watched her hands. Confident, methodical. She fixed the Maserati in under 10 minutes. "You can go now," she said, wiping her hands on a rag. He hesitated, then opened his wallet. "Let me pay you." "I don't want your money, Thomas." The use of his name made him pause. He hadn't told her. Before he could ask, she was already walking back to her truck. "By the way," she added, "you might want to check your garage. That ring? You never got it back." Then she drove off. He didn't sleep that night. He stared at the ceiling of his penthouse, brooding. The girl from the orphanage. The one who carved birds from wood, who gave him a brooch shaped like a hawk. She had cried when he left. They told him later she was adopted, but he never saw her again. The memory had faded, until now. By morning, he was in his private vault, and there it was, the brooch. Wooden, simple, delicate. He had kept it. He didn't know why. He drove back to the road where the Maserati had broken down. He found the shop, a converted barn with a sign that read, "Grant and Daughter Mechanics." She was there, wiping grease off her forearm. When she saw the brooch in his hand, she froze. "You kept it," she whispered. "I didn't remember, until now." "Of course not," she said bitterly. "Why would the golden boy remember the girl whose land his father stole?" He frowned. "What?" Maya took a deep breath, stepped closer. Her voice dropped. "My mother didn't die in a fire. She was taken. The fire was staged, and the land it happened on, it belonged to my family. A year later, your father built his first tech campus on it." "You're mistaken." "No, Thomas, you are. You've lived your whole life on lies." She handed him a folder. Old papers, maps, a birth certificate. "Your adoption? It wasn't legal. You weren't chosen. You were convenient. You were the alibi." He didn't know what to say. He stood there holding that fragile wooden bird in one hand and a folder that could end everything in the other. "And one more thing," she said before going back to work. "That ring you gave me, it wasn't just jewelry. It was a promise." She looked up. Her eyes, not angry, not pleading, just resolute. "You broke it." The folder lay untouched on the passenger seat as Thomas drove through the city. Traffic lights changed without him noticing. His fingers clenched the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned pale. In his head, one phrase repeated over and over. You weren't chosen, you were convenient. It didn't make sense. Not fully, but he hadn't thrown the folder away either. He hadn't even opened it. Not yet. He wasn't ready for the answers he might find. He parked his car in an underground garage 2 levels below the Weber Innovations Tower. 30 floors of polished glass and brushed steel, the empire his father had built. He entered through the executive elevator, nodding to no one. The office was quiet, too early for the buzz of assistants and analysts. He placed the folder on the desk. Slowly, he opened it. Birth certificates, old photos, land deeds with dates going back 30 years, a map of a rural property circled in red, and at the bottom, a faded article. Fire claims family home in Grant County, 1 dead. Next to it, handwritten in a delicate looping script, Amelia Grant, no remains found, no autopsy. Just a name crossed out. Thomas leaned back in his chair, suddenly dizzy. Meanwhile, Maya stood in a hidden corner of her grandfather's old house, behind a loose panel beneath the stairs. She reached deep into the compartment and pulled out a dust-covered ledger. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she held. Inside were records, names, transactions, all handwritten by her grandfather, who had kept copies of everything, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of mistrust. The last pages were the most damning. Amelia Grant, declared dead. Property transferred. Buyer, East Harbor Holdings, subsidiary of Weber Investments. The ink was red, circled, underlined. Maya traced the names with her fingers, remembering the way her grandfather had whispered warnings before he died. Truth burns slower than fire, he used to say, but it burns longer. She placed the ledger beside her own set of documents, satellite images showing the transformation of her family's land into the corporate campus that now hosted parties, awards, and billion-dollar pitches. At the bottom of one document, in faded ink, Project Orpheus, begin phase 1, after acquisition by default. She didn't know what Project Orpheus was yet, but she would. 2 days passed before Thomas appeared at the garage again. He didn't speak at first. Maya didn't look up from the car she was working on. The air smelled of oil, metal, and truth. I found her photo, he said finally. Your mother. I remember her. Maya looked at him then. She raised me alone until I was 6. Then there was the fire, or what they called a fire. Thomas swallowed. She's not dead, is she? No, Maya said. I don't think she ever was. Thomas's eyes darkened. Where is she? I don't know, but I think she's alive. Somewhere on one of your father's private properties. Off the books. He hesitated, then pulled out a flash drive. I accessed internal records, he said. I didn't know what I was looking for, but your folder made it impossible not to. I found old shipping logs, flights that aren't listed in the company reports, destinations scrubbed. But one thing stands out. He plugged the drive into a laptop and opened a map. A private island. No name, just coordinates. Last known flight went there. Year, 2005. Maya's heart skipped. That's 2 years after the fire. He nodded. The same year I was adopted. Silence stretched between them. Not cold, but heavy with recognition. That night, Thomas sat alone in his penthouse again. He poured himself a glass of scotch, but didn't drink it. His phone vibrated. A message from a number not in his contacts. You've started asking questions? Be careful which ones you answer. He stared at the screen. There was no reply option, just a sense of being watched. He turned to the folder from Maya again. This time he noticed something he hadn't before. An envelope taped to the back with a slip of paper inside. A note from a man he never met, Maya's grandfather. If you're reading this, then someone still cares enough to dig. That means the empire hasn't erased all of us. Yet. Underneath it, a photo. Young Amelia Grant holding a baby. Her eyes, Maya's eyes. But it wasn't Maya in her arms. It was him. Thomas dropped the photo. The next morning, Maya found Thomas waiting outside the garage before sunrise. "You saw it," she said. "I'm not his son." "No," she said gently. "You're my brother." He looked at her as if seeing her again for the first time. "They took you because you were easier to rewrite," Maya said. "You fit the narrative. A smart boy from nowhere. Nobody would question a fresh face if the paperwork was clean enough. But why? Because if the world knew the truth about the land, about the adoption, about our mother, the company wouldn't exist. And your father would be in prison." Thomas nodded slowly. "I want to find her," he said. "Our mother. Then we do it together." For the first time, they stood not as strangers, not even as allies, but as something else, something unshakable. Blood. The island had no name on official records, just coordinates. Latitude north of the commercial shipping lines. Longitude far enough to be forgotten. According to internal company memos, the location was once used for retreats, corporate wellness getaways for the Weber board. But Thomas knew better now. That island didn't offer peace. It hid ghosts. He stood in front of the private jet, face pale but resolved. Maya climbed the steps behind him, carrying the leather-bound ledger and a tablet full of maps and satellite data. Neither of them spoke much during the flight. What was there to say? The past was no longer buried. It was circling them like smoke. The descent was rough, the airstrip cracked and barely usable. The moment they stepped onto the tarmac, Maya noticed something. "Look!" A camera, mounted high in a tree, still operational, watching. Thomas pulled his cap lower and motioned toward a service road. "Let's move fast." They followed the road until it disappeared into dense foliage. Beyond it, a complex of old concrete buildings appeared, overgrown but not abandoned. Solar panels lined the roof, the kind you only install if you expect to stay off-grid for a long time. Inside the main building, they found sterile corridors, long-forgotten paperwork, and a door marked "Personnel, Restricted Access." Maya picked the lock. What lay inside was a small, windowless room, a table, a chair, and a folder marked Subject A, Amelia G. Thomas reached for it, hands shaking. Inside, logs. Subject non-compliant, high cognitive function, monitoring required. A photo. Amelia, 15 years older. Pale, hollow-eyed, alive. Maya turned away. Her mother had been here. There was another folder, unlabeled, thinner. Inside, a single birth certificate, Thomas's. Only the name field was blank. Back in the city, a storm was brewing. Not in the skies, but in the offices of Weber Innovations. Carl Weber, the patriarch, stood before a wall of screens. He had already seen the access logs. He knew the jet had gone to the island. He knew his carefully crafted illusion was cracking. He picked up the phone. "Send a team. Quiet. If they speak to the press, this family dies in headlines." Meanwhile, Maya and Thomas returned from the island with everything they needed. They had proof, but they didn't go home. Instead, they went to someone Thomas had avoided for years. Evelyn Dane, an investigative journalist once blacklisted by Weber Innovations for asking too many questions. Evelyn opened the folder in silence, read, stared, then laughed. "This isn't a leak," she said. "It's a bomb." "You'll run it?" Maya asked. "I'll do better. I'll bury them." Evelyn's hands trembled as she held up the photo of Amelia. "They made me think I was crazy for asking about this woman 20 years ago," she said. "They told me she was a myth." "She's not," Maya said. "She's my mother, and she's still alive." That night, Thomas sat alone in his penthouse, replaying surveillance footage from the island. In the corner of one clip, a small figure, moving between trees, wearing white. He zoomed in. It was her. A scar on the left cheek, short hair, older, but unmistakable. "Maya," he whispered, calling her. She came immediately. "She's alive." They watched the clip together. A timestamp confirmed it. 5 weeks ago. "She's not just alive," Maya said. "She's still there." Thomas stood. "Then we're going back." "No," she said. "Not yet. We do this right. No rescue missions. We make it public. Force them to give her up. He hesitated, then nodded. You're right. She handed him a document. This was also on the island. He read it. His face changed. It was the full plan for Project Orpheus. The document outlined more than just land acquisition. It was a blueprint for an entire system of cover-ups. Children moved from foster homes to private boarding schools. Identities altered. Medical files erased. All to feed an image of clean, photogenic success for Weber's corporate heirs. And one entry near the end caught Thomas's eye. Orpheus, 13. Target selected. Male, age 5. Replace existing foster record. Implant Weber identity. Prepare for board presentation within 18 months. Maya looked over his shoulder. That's you. Across town, Carl Weber made another call. They have documents, he said, and now I have a leak in the records division. The voice on the other end was calm. Your son? No, my mistake. The line went dead. Carl stood, poured himself a drink, and stared out over the city. His empire had risen from ash, and it would fall the same way. But he wasn't done yet. Later that night, Maya received a message from a blocked number. Just one image. Her mother's face, eyes open, looking directly at the camera, and a timestamp. Yesterday. She showed it to Thomas. She's alive, she said again. But now they know we're close. Thomas picked up the phone and made the call Evelyn told him not to make. To the press? Maya asked. No, he said. To the board. You think they'll help? I think they'll want to save themselves. The next morning, Weber Innovations received a subpoena. Anonymous files had been sent to a federal regulator. Evelyn published the first article at dawn, The Children of Orpheus Inside a Billionaire's Human Experiment. By midday, reporters were outside the gates. The island was no longer a secret, and somewhere, behind thick walls and hidden cameras, Amelia Grant opened her eyes and heard, for the first time in 2 decades, the sound of a helicopter overhead. Don't speak until the ribbon's cut. Just smile. Carl Weber's voice was calm, but the tight grip on Thomas's shoulder betrayed the tension beneath. They stood side by side on a makeshift stage in front of a towering glass complex. The new flagship of Weber Innovations. A smart city prototype. A monument to progress. Below them, politicians, investors, media. Thomas looked out over the crowd and then up at the drone cameras filming the event live. All eyes on them. Just as his father wanted. But the microphones weren't the only things recording today. Behind the stage, Maya stood in a maintenance uniform, a press badge pinned to her chest. In her bag, a USB drive, a press packet, and an old wooden brooch. Security barely glanced at her as she passed. Thomas looked down from the stage. Their eyes met. He gave the signal. Maya moved. The ceremony began. Carl Weber stepped to the podium. Today is not just about innovation, he began. It's about legacy, about building a future built on stolen land, a voice cut through the microphone. Gasps. Maya stepped onto the stage, flanked by Evelyn and 2 federal agents. Thomas didn't move to stop them. Instead, he took the microphone from his father's stunned hand. I used to believe in this legacy, Thomas said, voice steady. I was proud to carry this name, until I learned it wasn't mine. None of it was. He turned to the crowd. My name was taken. My family erased. I was adopted into this empire for one reason, to cover up a crime. The crowd erupted. Flashes from cameras burst like lightning. Carl tried to step forward, but 2 agents blocked him. Maya pulled out a tablet and connected it to the stage screen. One by one, documents appeared. A forged death certificate. Internal memos ordering the cover-up of the fire. Video clips from the island. Amelia Grant's photo. The final image hit like a thunderclap. Amelia, older but alert, staring into a security camera. She's alive, Maya said. She's been held against her will for 20 years, and your applause helped pay for it. Carl lost his composure. You don't know what you're talking about, he snapped. You don't understand what was at stake. Thomas faced him. No, Father. You don't understand. The world doesn't belong to you. People aren't projects. A murmur ran through the crowd. Carl turned to the reporters, grasping for control. I saved him. That boy would have died in the system. His name is not Thomas Weber, Maya said. His name is Oliver Grant, and he was never yours to take. At that moment, federal agents moved in. You're under arrest, one said. For what? Carl demanded. Kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy, false imprisonment, wire fraud. Shall I go on? Thomas turned away. In the chaos, Maya felt someone tug at her sleeve. She turned and froze. It was her mother, Amelia. Alive, thin, eyes sunken, but alive. Maya stepped forward. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. They embraced in silence as camera shutters exploded around them. The crowd, once murmuring, fell silent. And in that stillness, something broke. Not between Maya and her mother, but in the world that had kept them apart. The silence spoke louder than any statement. Hours later, the complex was locked down. Carl Weber was in federal custody. Evelyn's story was the lead on every news channel. Public outcry followed. Shareholders fled. Political allies distanced themselves. And Maya and Thomas, now publicly revealed as siblings, were asked to speak once more. Not on a stage, but in a courtroom. Weeks passed. Investigations spread like wildfire. More names emerged. More records. A web of shell companies used to move children under corporate guardianship. False adoptions, sealed identities, all swept under the rug with donation money and press releases. Project Orpheus was no longer just a scandal. It was a national wound. Thomas stood in front of a government committee and said, "Empires don't fall because of enemies. They fall when they forget the people they build over." Maya stood beside him. My mother didn't die in a fire, she said. She was stolen, and we were all told to forget. She paused. But some things, some people, don't burn that easily. Back on the island, government teams cleared the compound. Amelia was returned to the city, placed in medical care, reunited with her family. The land once sold under forged deeds was returned. Maya refused to sell it again. Instead, she made a decision. We build something new, she said. Something honest. Thomas agreed. They would use the land, not for profit, but for healing. They founded the Grant Foundation, a home for displaced youth, survivors of the system, and children caught in the shadows of wealth. At the entrance, they installed a sculpture, a small wooden hawk. The courthouse steps were unusually quiet the morning of the sentencing. No reporters, no crowds, just the wind tugging gently at the flag above the doors. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Federal agents, legal observers, former employees, a few loyalists from the Weber board. And in the front row, Maya sat between her mother and Thomas. Amelia held her daughter's hand. She hadn't said much since the rescue. Words took time to return after 20 years of silence. But her grip said everything. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Carl Weber, once the most powerful man in the city, now sat behind bulletproof glass. He looked older, smaller, as if the absence of power had shrunk his very frame. He showed no emotion as the charges were read. 37 counts: kidnapping, fraud, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, human rights violations. The final sentence: life without parole. There was no applause, just silence. A dignified ending to a monstrous legacy. Carl didn't look at Thomas. Not once. Thomas didn't look at him either. Weeks passed. The tower that once bore the Weber name was stripped of its logos. The new foundation opened in the Grant District, a name the city restored after the court ruled the land seizure unlawful. Maya stood at the edge of the campus on the morning of the ribbon cutting. But this time, there were no luxury suits. No drone cameras, just families. Children, social workers, survivors. A group of teens, all from group homes, helped paint the outside wall of the main building. Above the entrance, in bold lettering, the Grant Oliver Foundation. Thomas approached quietly. He was no longer in a suit. The sharp edges of his corporate life had softened. In his hands, he held two envelopes. One was a deed, the land fully transferred to Maya and the foundation. The second, a name change document. I don't want to be a Weber anymore, he said. That name doesn't belong to me. Maya nodded slowly. What will you use? My birth name, the one they tried to erase. She opened the document. Oliver Grant. He looked around at the new center. Classrooms, workshops, gardens. Feels like home, he said. It is, Maya replied. Later that week, the two of them returned to the island one final time. The compound was being deconstructed under federal supervision, but one building remained untouched. It had once been Amelia's quarters. Maya and Oliver stood inside the empty room. Do you think she remembers all of it? Oliver asked. She remembers enough, Maya said, and the rest we'll remember for her. They placed a small box in the center of the room. Inside, the brooch, the ring, and a photo of Amelia holding the two of them as children. Then they walked away. Months later, the foundation flourished. Maya led the mechanics training program, specifically aimed at girls from the foster system. Oliver managed the educational fund, helping connect kids with mentors, apprenticeships, and support networks. And Amelia, she spoke again. Sometimes quietly, sometimes suddenly, but when she spoke, it was always with purpose. To a group of teens sitting in a circle, she once said, "They told me I was dead, but I wasn't. I was waiting. For you. For justice. For my children." There were tears in the room. Not sadness. Recognition. Maya reached over and gently held her mother's hand. In a final public appearance, Oliver was asked, "What do you want to be remembered for? After everything?" He paused for a long time. "Not for what I inherited," he said, "but for what I returned." In a quiet corner of the foundation campus, beneath a tree planted by Amelia herself, there is a plaque. Truth doesn't die, it waits. And just below it, in memory of everything they tried to erase,